You're listening to a special presentation from Night of the Living podcast, Zoned Out with Freddy and Joe. Yeah, we're revisiting the Twilight Zone. Yeah, we did the whole first season already.
Just a little knock that under the belt and call it season 2.
It's season 2, and we're kicking things off with King 9 Will Not Return. Original air date, September 30th, 1960. First of 9 episodes, directed by old friend of Rod Serling, Buzz Kulik. He also directs The Trouble with Templeton, Static, 100 Yards Over the Rim, The Mind of the Matter, Game of Pool, Quality of Mercy, Jezebel, and On Thursday We Leave for Home. He was also a producer and director of TV commercials, but after he was with that agency for a few years, he left and was one of the directors of the golden age of television. So he directed many episodes of Playhouse 90, which I'm sure is where he met Rod Serling probably. Are You There? The Defenders, and The Twilight Zone. He began directing features in the 60s, but returned to TV because he's hot shit in TV. And he, why not be a big fish in a small pond? And he came back and he made Brian's Song in 1971, which is a legendary made-for-TV movie that makes grown men cry. So if you've never seen Brian's Song, you should check it out. Written by Rod Serling, this episode. The first of 7 episodes with music by Fred Steiner, and he's going to go on to work in a bunch of different capacities on Star Trek, Star Wars, Gremlins, and a whole bunch of other great stuff. Also about the music, this is the first episode to feature the Marius Constant theme, which is what we know, the ding, 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 ding. Like, so we always, and even,
or is that,
yeah.
Is it that part, or is it the do 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 do?
Yeah, it's that. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. Okay. It's weird because it's a mashup. The theme we know, it wasn't all composed by Marius Constant. It's a combination of Bernard Herrmann and one or two other composers and Marius Constant, this one. And
gotcha.
He never really got credit in his, like in any kind of really solid way. In fact, like we were talking about it as Bernard Herrmann's music for the longest time, but really the theme everybody knows by ear, like what you were just doing, Joe, is that Marius Constant theme.
Interesting.
So I thought that was pretty interesting, but it all comes from the network screwing composers, because it was all about managing union rights and knowing that they could. That's why so many of these episodes, instead of having a composer listed, have music department, and then you have 4 or 5 composers listed because they're all pastiche of that work that these other composers did, and it was all a way to just fuck them over. Pardon my French. Cast of 7, including Serling. We have Captain James Embry. He's the sole survivor, maybe, of the King 9 bomber crash. This is first and only appearance by Robert Cummings. He's was known for playing mostly in comedies, and also for his youthful appearance, which I found he's like a 50-year-old guy, maybe playing like like as the Twilight Zone does, casting people who are 10 years older. But he
reminded me of Dick Clark.
Yeah, you know what? That's funny you should say that, because also Dick Clark, known for being ageless for the longest time. Maybe it's something about that particular kind of face, but he was he had a very strict healthy diet he stuck to, and he credited that with staying ageless.
Nice.
I wouldn't say he's ageless looking at it, maybe for the 60s, but
yeah.
now we have like Paul Rudd's and Timothy Chalamet's to contend with. So after acting school, he came up with 2 alter egos. The first one was a British alter ego, Blade Stanhope Conway. This is how he was trying to get interest in casting directors on Broadway.
Blade.
It's pretty funny. I know a guy whose nickname is Blade because he used to sell knives door to door.
I love that. Yeah. That's fantastic.
So this success in Broadway led him to Hollywood. Then he made a new alter ego called Texan Bruce Hutchins to get film roles. So he's a big Texan for that. And then eventually he went back to his real name and starred in some comedies. He was like a bumbling young guy. Like a Hugh Grant of the 60s is probably the best way to describe it.
Sure.
He found most of his success in TV, like The Bob Cummings Show, and My Living Doll, which is kind of like a Bewitched I Dream of Jeannie thing, where male fantasy doll follows all your commands. which is now our reality for a lot of weird, lonely men out there. No offense. I think if you're lonely, you should be able to get a doll and feel good. Go for it, guys.
Right.
A psychiatrist, so sorry.
You're good.
I was gonna say in the episode, he's a psychiatrist. Sorry, the character, and he's given control of this robot that is played by Julie Newmar. So like, and this ran for a while, but the phrase "that does not compute" came from the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it has
that's wild.
Some cultural cred. And again, that is My Living Doll from 1964. He's the godson of Orville Wright.
Whoa.
Isn't that cool? He taught him how to fly. So
one of the Wright brothers.
Yep. And he was a real pilot too, the actor. He appeared in 2 Alfred Hitchcock films, Saboteur and Dial In for Murder. Cummings and Serling were really good friends. And when Serling created a show called The Loner, which is kind of, I would say, it's not really, you can find it on YouTube, but it's not like streaming on any big network or anything. But History of Network TV has a great YouTube channel with that series on it. But it's a show it's a Western written by Rod Serling that stars Lloyd Bridges, but was originally conceived as a vehicle for this actor to star. And I've never watched it, but I plan to. I hear it's really, really good.
Interesting.
So then you have the psychiatrist character. This is the only appearance by Gene Lyons. He's a TV actor, and he's best known for playing Ambassador Fox in Star Trek. The episode Taste of Armageddon. Yeah, I don't know.
Interesting.
This is like he wears a really stupid costume in that, which is a lot of fun. There's a lot of retro Star Trek stuff. Yet another Star Trek connection.
He's got a very interesting face.
Really does, yeah. The doctor, this is Paul Lambert, another character actor. He was the orangutan minister who officiates the gorilla's funeral in Planet of the Apes, which is another Rod Serling piece. But like, I love that. And you find that throughout Twilight Zone, you're going to find a lot of apes in the Twilight Zone because of the Serling connection. He learned to act because of the GI Bill funded his education in acting, which I thought was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
You don't hear that too terribly much. The nurse, the reason she's notable, she's barely in it, blink and you miss it at the end, but that's Jenna McMahon, who wrote for the Carol Burnett show. But the thing I remember, or I know her for, I don't remember her for it, I didn't know it till I watched this episode, but she helped create Mama's Family, which was a staple in our house on TV.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Vicki Lawrence.
Yeah, classic.
Yeah, great sitcom. So I think that's a lot of cred for her historically. I only have a couple episodes about the episode itself. It was based on the true story of the Lady Be Good, which was a U.S. Air Force B-24. It vanished in 1943 after bombing Naples. Yeah, it was discovered in the Libyan desert in 1959. So what's that? 16 years later, by an oil exploration team. And it was preserved because of the desert environment, kind of like, I guess there was no rust or anything like that because it was so dry. The next year, the bodies of the 8 of the 9 crew members were recovered, but the 9th body was never found. And there is the date of this crash is in the episode on the little grave, April 5th, 1943, in the episode itself.
Wow.
Yeah. And I would say the big themes of this episode are probably like kind of like a survivor's guilt thing, but we'll get into that when Joe gets into the meat of the story right after this. Welcome back, Joe. Let's get into the good stuff.
Story meat.
Story meat.
The first thing that came to my mind, though, I wanted to mention is that that intro, because it is so different, it's really kind of striking. It was just, I thought it was much more aggressive and it's more intense. The what we assume, a lot of people associate with the Twilight Zone, because it's funny. The first season, I kept going, this is spooky music, but I don't remember this from being the Twilight Zone. And then you start to associate it, and Anyway,
Yeah,
and then the
the
voiceover.
original was so like it sounded like harps and stuff. It was like
Yeah, yeah,
it was all like a dreamscape kind of original. It would just let you sink into it like a warm bath, and now it's like bam, 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 bam. You're in the Twilight
yeah.
Zone. Yeah,
It was like more fantasy, like, oh, you're in a grove that's hidden somewhere back, and now it's like you're going to the Twilight Zone.
it's a big improvement, but not like it's. I like the theme they used in the first season, but yeah, this one definitely got a lot more personality, more
Well, and they
memorable.
well, and the voiceover changed, and he does. You're traveling through another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land of imagination. Next stop, the Twilight Zone. And he does that kind of, he gets a lot more emphatic at the end of it, where he's like, the Twilight Zone. It's like in your face. And I thought that was kind of interesting that he goes through that so much faster. Like it seems like a shorter voiceover, like they wanted more time to get into the story itself. So let's do it.
Part of that too was I was just reading about this. There used to be a real rush to get those segments when they added them in, where it was him standing in the scene. That sometimes it was a matter of they're shooting that day and they just get him in on set after they wrap, and they do the effect where the camera spins around to cover the edit, so it looks like they just pan to him, kind of is
Yeah.
what they're going for. And so a lot of that was just because the Orson Welles decided against doing it, and that's who they originally wanted. Even after Serling had narrated the first season, they still wanted to get Orson Welles in there. But
Wow.
because he was writing and not only this, but he was working on other things, like
Yeah.
it was a matter of squeezing him in when they could. So sometimes it's just like, get in there, get it done, and get out.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because I have a specific note on that. So he does the voiceover, and I'll do the voiceover, but then I'll do a note on it. He goes, "This is Africa, 1943. War spits out its violence overhead, and the sandy graveyard swallows it up. Her name is King 9, B-25 medium bomber, 12th Air Force. On a hot, still morning, she took off from Tunisia to bomb the southern tip of Italy. An errant piece of flak tore a hole in the wing tank, and like a wounded bird, this is where she landed, not to return on this day or any other day." So as that happens, right after he says the sandy grave swallows it up, the camera swings wildly to the right and does that kind of, like you said, that spin to make it look like an edit, like they're panning over to him. But then he does the second line. Her name is King 9, and does the tip of Italy. And as he says the tip of Italy, you can watch the camera shift slightly to the left to frame him better.
Correction.
It's one of those things. Yeah, it's one of those things you would never you would never see that now ever. But it's so human. It's so like, yeah, this is a show that's trying to get production done, and they just a couple inches, but you can tell like it shifts.
I don't mind
something that charms me.
I like those too. Those moments, the handmade quality of things.
Yeah, yeah, totally. All right, so we start out, and as they said, it's World War II, and we're looking at this wreckage of a airplane on the ground in the sand. Weird thing, there's no smoke, there's no fire, which that's not unheard of for a low budget TV show. It's just kind of like wreckage, and we start to hear a lot of Embry's thoughts, Captain James Embry, who's thinking through, he kind of is waking up, and it's really cool. I like the experience I like about this was very similar in feel to me to Where Is Everybody, except it's more of a real world situation. So he's kind of getting up, he's shaking his head and imagining what's the processing you would go through if you're waking up in this situation.
It's interesting
So
you're
he's-
talking about that. Just
Yeah.
real quick with Where Is Everybody in this? I think a lot of the common thread with these episodes that happen throughout the series is the higher the budget of the episode, the more likely you are to have one main character carrying like 20 of 24 minutes or whatever of screen time.
Oh, sure.
For budgetary reasons. But it also becomes a kind of a signature of the series for that reason. The lone story is a lone wandering hero story.
Interesting. Well, I imagine that wreckage wasn't cheap to set up and
Yeah, it was a
stage.
real plane too. So I mean, like they've rebuilt it on the site. That had to cost a fortune in labor.
That's wild. So he's walking through, and like I said, I meant just put a note here that he looks and sounds a lot like Dick Clark to me. Um, so he's walking around the wreckage and he's talking it through, and he's like, "Okay, there's a reason." You know, it's really interesting to hear his like he's literally reasoning with himself. It's okay, and I wonder how much of that is training that Sterling was familiar with. Of like, okay, what do they teach you in boot camp? There's a reason for what you're doing. You're disoriented. Get yourself centered. Get yourself, find yourself your survival stuff. Where's your team? All that sort of stuff. So he starts looking around for the rest of his crew, realizing that he had a crew and that they bellied in. And we're getting all the exposition from the episode. They crashed. They took off from Tunisia. They were trying to figure out. He's trying to figure out how they landed and where everyone is because they bellied in, meaning they flew in and landed on the belly of the plane. And he starts yelling out for members of the crew. This is just, I don't know if this was intentional or what, but he's yelling out the names of the crew, Blake, all this stuff, and he yells out, Jimenez, Jimenez,
Oh
not
yeah.
not Jimenez, but Jimenez. And I thought, does he just not know, or is that intentional, or it's
Yeah.
one of those small details that is just like, oh man, Jimenez, and
It's
welcome to
funny,
1960.
not just with that name, but there are other moments sometimes throughout the Twilight Zone where you realize that there were probably conversations on how to pronounce other words even too, and they landed on something that's not what we expect today.
Right,
Like
right.
little things, yeah. The specific example is not coming to mind, but there was another episode we watched where we're like, that guy said that really strangely, like you would never hear that word pronounced that way now because we've all agreed on
Yeah,
the other pronunciation and stuff.
right, right, exactly. And so it's going through this, and there's actually quite a bit of time showing this, which I thought was really cool to develop the situation of the character and kind of stretch out what his experience is like. At one point, he gets on the radio. He's kind of Mayday radioing that they've landed, and he's not getting any responses. The movement of the wind, like he hears something outside, thinking it's one of his crew members. He runs outside, and it's just the wing moving, a flap on the wing, which genuinely looked like a plane that had landed. I mean, I've taken tours of old military planes and stuff, and that's the genuine article. You could see the rivets where it links together and stuff.
Have you ever been to here in Ohio, north of us? There's Wright Pat, where Hangar 18 is, where they supposedly took the Area 51 spacecraft and all that.
No.
Well, they have an Air Force museum there that it has bombers that you can go through like that. And as a kid, it scared they had wax figures in them, like in bomber jackets and stuff. It was real
Man.
super creepy. It smelled a way that I've never. It's the only place I've been that smelled like this combination of like leather and gun oil
Yes.
and just like it feels, obviously exaggeration, but it feels like 1,000 years of stuff in there. It's from the
Yes.
40s, and it's to me, it's one of the spookiest settings to be inside of an old World War II bomber, because of that museum, and also because of like heavy metal, that animated sequence with the bomber, and then this.
Yeah.
I'm just always, to me, bombers always look haunted.
Yeah. Yeah, the same thing for not to digress too much, but like old warships and stuff. I took a tour, I think it was in Philadelphia of a or maybe New Jersey of an old submarine. And like you said, it's machine oil, it's leather, it's cigarettes, it's like sweat of thousands of hours of men just living their life. Can you imagine how awful it must have smelled when they were actively using it?
Oh
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
definitely.
Just being in and immersed in that, and then like, all the craziness of either in a bomber or in the submarine, the lights go out, right? And you don't probably have a lot of lights to begin with, but the lights go out, and it's like you're in this flying can. It's crazy. It's just,
Very scary.
yeah. You think about the trauma that these soldiers went through on multiple levels, and this is definitely stands out. All right, so he's still trying to he hears that sound, and he's trying to reason through where he's at, and so he hits a couple different notes. He can hear him kind of waver into a little bit of like scary madness, and but he kind of chuckling, and then like, is this a joke? Like he just doesn't know how to interpret it, and it's really interesting to hear him. He'll hit like something that sounds like hit from his training, where he's like, "Nope, I'm the captain. I'm responsible for these guys. I have to figure out where they are. They're my crew. I'm responsible for their safety. I've got to figure this out." And so he kind of sharpens in, and at one point he goes outside the plane and finds a canteen, and he gets this kind of rush of hope, and then he's yelling out for that crew member, and he calls him, what do you call him, like the Bronx ox or something, the Bronx monkey or something, just like the joking I'm sure they used ahead of time or beforehand. And then he kind of falls over as he's trying to figure out where are they, where could they possibly be. He starts drinking the water, and he kind of drops the water, and you see this picture of Blake, one of the crew members in the pilot seat of the plane, silently smiling and kind of laughing at him. And he's like, Blake, Blake. It's really a disturbing scene
Yes,
because Blake looks so creepy.
he does.
Like the character looks, he's just got kind of this lick on his face, and it's all silent. So there's no like laughter. You're not hearing his voice or anything. You're just hearing Embry. And he starts stumbling towards the cockpit because he's got this moment of like, oh God, there you are, finally. And then he disappears. Blake disappears as he gets there. So it just gets more and more creepy. And the next thing he starts realizing he's hallucinating, right? Oh, sorry, they did a commercial break, and then he comes back and he's back on the radio. He's realizing he's hallucinating. He gives up on the radio. He's like, maybe I'm drunk in a booth and I tied one on and I'm just gonna wake up from this. And he's kind of, you see him, his swings on the pendulum between madness and sanity are getting bigger, right? He's laughing a little bit, but then he's crying, but then he's kind of straightening himself out, and it's I thought it was really pretty good for a performance of that kind of, because that's hard to do realistically.
To carry the hysterical kind of unhinged thing for so long.
Yeah,
You know, you're talking about his narrating of his situation is something that Rod Serling apparently really hated about his own writing. That in these early episodes that he did that, like he did it with the very first episode, Where Is Everybody, where the character is through the dialogue, exposing a lot of the story and everything, and expositing whatever you say, and
yeah.
he hated that about his own writing. But I find it interesting that he gets to season 2 and it's still part of his screenwriting process, and I'm wondering when that's going to change. Because if you're that, the interviews I listen to is like, if you're that irked with your own craft on some specific way, you should see like the changes in season 2
Right.
as it progresses with his screenplays, that there should be less dialogue.
Well, and imagine it's just he's at a point where maybe he's like, well, I'm trying to figure out new tools, and sometimes he does, and sometimes he's like, well, there's one guy. I got to do it this way, And so it just falls into it, which is interesting. Again, all these connections to the first season, first episode, second season, first episode, kind of launching in there. It's familiar, but it's different. So I thought it was really cool.
Same theme of both premieres. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, one of the themes.
Yeah. So he at one point, then he's like, he resolves he's not hallucinating, and he yells for his crew again, and he puts on his sunglasses and his hat like he's taking command. He looks a little bit like MacArthur for a moment. And he's stumbling around, and he's talking, and he's laughing, and he's this and that, and he's yelling at his crew, and he hears a tapping noise, and he stumbles to this small berm of sand and brush, and he's like, all right, you guys, and he stumbles over, and he's like, this isn't funny, that sort of kind of words, and he sees a grave for Klein, and that's the one with the date that you mentioned on it, that April 5th, 1943. And he apologizes to the client. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know. I'm sorry." And you're like, "I didn't know. What's he talking about?" Like, you're kind of like, "Oh yeah, he's apologizing and he's a little bit crazy." But then you realize there's more to it later. So he's kneeling there in front of the grave, and he starts hearing jets, and he's like, "What are what? Wait, what's that?" He's like, "Are those? What are the?" And he starts describing them in a way that a person who doesn't know what a jet is, but does know what a jet shouldn't know what a jet is, but does know what a jet is. And that was a cool um, kind of threading of the needle of what's that? That I don't recognize jets. Wait, jets. That's a jet. I know that's a jet. What do I know about jets? You know, and he starts labeling off all the or listing off all these different jets, and he's realizes he does know about jets, and he's like, "This doesn't make sense. It's 1943." And he's trying to struggle with this, and he starts laughing and talking to himself, and he starts yelling for the crew, and he panics that they need to get out of there, and he's clearly delirious and delusional, and he's like trying to lift the plane out of the sand and like get the propeller going and stuff, and he's like laughing, and then he's crying, and then it's just really intense. um and then at one point he starts laughing, and he goes, "Oh, hey, why don't you guys, oh, this is funny. Why don't you guys just spring up out of the sand like a bunch of jumping jacks? Just stand there and laugh. See? Just let." And then breaks off, and he does this kind of a cool, creepy, a little bit funny face, and he sees them. He sees his crew up on the berm, and he like runs up there, and he's like, "Hey." He's like, they're gone. And he's kind of doing this thing where he's kind of passing out. And again, it's cool. It's worth a watch just to see his performance, which wasn't super over the top and also wasn't understated. It was kind of just right. And they're all laughing at him silently. They're all not making any noise. So he stumbles over there, and then they disappear again. And he's trying to reach out and grab them, and he just kind of falls over, and he's like, I give up. He's like, "Please, God, let me in on it. Let me in on what's going on. I can't figure it out. Please let me in on it." And he falls over, and he's like grasping at the sand, literally punching sand, but grasping at it, trying to squeeze it through his hands. And the camera shifts, and it's bed sheets that he's grabbing, and he's in a hospital. And it's at that moment that we see a couple of other doctors in the room, and they're talking around him. And basically, they outline the fact that he was suffering from fevers, he was discharged, and 17 years later, he collapsed after suffering hallucinations, they said. And they said after he looked at a newspaper headline, and the newspaper headline, they show it, "World War II bomber found intact in desert." And it goes on to describe how the mission that he was on, he was not on it. And he came down with a fever just before he was supposed to fly out with them. And he was replaced by another captain. And so they caused him to have survivor's guilt and all this. And I don't know if they address it exactly then, but then they do later to kind of reemphasize that. So it's got a really intense theme too of this idea.
Very
And
depressing
so
for the Twilight Zone.
yeah, it's sad. I mean, it's sad, but also the fact that they're acknowledging it is, I thought, really powerful. And I thought this might have been one of those healing moments on a show for some veterans of World War II to watch with their kids, or something, and be like, yeah, this is how terrible it is. I mean, it's hell. You're living in hell. And he kind of wakes up and talks about it being a crazy dream. And the doctor and the psychiatrist come over, and he says, "I should have been on the plane. I should have been on that mission. I chickened out." And the psychiatrist, they're kind of pushing him back down in the bed, and he's trying to struggle to get up. And the psychiatrist said, "You didn't chicken out. You had no way of knowing that plane wasn't going to come back." Now you realize it more as time goes by, and you'll feel better for it. It's out in the open now. You don't have to hide it in a pit deep inside of you. That's what's been hurting you all these years. And they talk about his fevers. And he says, another crazy thing, an illusion or a dream or whatever. I was out there in the desert, and above me in the sky, jets. Jets. Isn't that wild? 1943, African desert, and jet planes overhead. Just as if I had gone back there today. And his smile kind of fades, and he says, Did I? Did I go back? Did I go back to my plane? The psychiatrist says, in your mind. That's how you went back. Only in your mind. And he says, only in my mind. And he kind of falls back, and his hand, I thought this is a really cool piece by the actor. As the doctors are talking, like up on the back part of the scene, you can see his hand still grasping, trying to grab at the sand. And then they show the doctors leave, and they're saying, I think it'll get better from here. We're just going to get his things together, and we'll start treatment and all that. And they ask the nurse to get his clothes together. And as she does, she's putting them on a countertop surface, and his shoe tips over. And she's like, what's that? And the guy comes over and picks it up, and it's a handful of sand that was in his shoe. Dun, dun, dun.
Very Freddy Krueger.
Yeah. And we get the outro from Mr. Serling. Enigma buried in the sand. A question mark with broken wings that lies in silent grace as a marker in the desert shrine. How odd. How the real consorts with the shadows. How the present fuses with the past. How does it happen? The question is on file in the silent desert. And the answer? The answer is waiting for us in the Twilight Zone.
The Twilight Zone. My notes for this episode are 666 words.
Dun, 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 dun.
That blew your mind.
I don't know. It did.
So, this one to me is kind of a bummer. It's a good episode, but like for me, for them to start the season, I like the way it echoes the first season premiere. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I got to say, what I like about this too, real quick, private story. It's not my story to tell, so I'm only going to tell a little tiny piece of it. But my ex, her grandpa on her dad's side was in World War II, and he was part of the planning team that was set for the D-Day invasion, and he never talked about the war, ever talked about the war. And it was one of those things that I think, like this guy, without the hospital visit, who kept that deep in a pit inside and never talked about it, and never could deal with the emotions and the psychological impact of what that actually meant to send hundreds, thousands of people to their death. And like he had a telegram of announcing the end of the war, like the actual telegram that was sent to one of the military bases. It was just really fascinating.
Wild, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember being able to talk with him just one time, and he also didn't talk. He had lost his wife after that, and didn't talk about any of that stuff. And one time was willing to open up, and I did the stupid thing. I was young too, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I said, "What was that like? Just to be in that." That moment of dealing with that, because he had a little clipping of like the planning stuff and some pictures. And again, I felt so stupid in retrospect. He just took the things back silently, didn't say anything, put them back in the box he had pulled them out of, and put it away.
Yeah.
And that was the end of the conversation. I was like,
I don't think it was a stupid thing. It wasn't a stupid question.
But I mean, like I had no idea of the context that I was stepping into, and so I didn't know the right thing to say. So that's actually been a motivator for me to really kind of try to understand where people are coming from, because that's how you can have a conversation, is you just be a better listener than a talker,
Yeah.
and be willing to just sit in silence and accept whatever somebody's willing to share. That's how you can learn those things. That's where you expand and connect with those people, because sometimes that's all they can give, is just a little bit.
That was
So,
my experience with my own father. He was a Vietnam veteran, and he experienced some really horrible things in Vietnam. And we heard the fun stories growing up, and there were
yeah,
fun stories. There were a lot of fun stories. He was drafted, he was a young guy, and like, I mean, there's things about Vietnam. It wasn't all terrible. Like, I don't mean the war itself was terrible, but there was some
yeah,
interesting, like, there was like a culture among the Army and the Marines and everything then that was interesting. And but when we got to the darker stuff, it wasn't until literally like on his deathbed that he opened up about some of the really, really horrible things. Like, I think he wanted to talk about them, but there's the fear of like putting yourself back in that position. And I think that's maybe might speak to why when you asked that question, he just was like, he wanted to share, obviously, to show you those things,
yeah,
but there's only so far you can go and keep your shit together. I think when you're dealing
right,
with PTSD, like, you're like, well, I can't relive that right now. So I'm just
yeah,
going to
right.
shut up,
Yeah, well, and all the social pieces working together, in that men of a certain age feel like they can't share emotionally because
Yeah.
that's weakness, or if they do share these things, they're not going to be loved anymore because they're not strong, and because they've done something monstrous, even though they had to, because it was,
War.
that was
Yeah.
war. It's just, yeah, it's listen to where people are coming from if you can, because sometimes it's not what you expect.
And it's
And
happening now for a lot of people,
yeah,
we might not be officially at war anywhere, but like, I mean, this is all current events
yeah,
stuff too.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
happening. It's the time right now to maybe prevent this sort of thing for a lot of service people.
yeah,
We'd never learn, but who knows?
yeah. So connect where you can, and I don't know, I'm not a religious person, but have grace when you can. And it's hard, but that's the hard part of communication. That's the hard part of humanity, right?
Yeah, that's what makes
um
Rod Serling. This is one of those episodes that actually has a much deeper meaning
yeah, yeah,
and
that's
purpose.
really good. Now, next week, we have The Man in the Bottle, which is actually kind of fun and quirky, and has some, I don't know, I enjoyed it. So
You need it
I think it's a good
after
one.
King 9 will not return. You need the
Yeah.
man in the bottle badly. It feels like first season Twilight Zone more.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a bit of a palate cleanser. And I just want to note that the ads for the shows that air, I have in the episodes that I have, they talk about the other shows on their stations they're going to air, and it's the Andy Griffith show they're promoting now.
I
You see a
saw
little
that too.
promo of Howard, what's
Ron Howard. It's
Ron
Opie.
Howard, well, yeah, fishing in the lake. I just love it. So
Yeah, I like too that on again, Kyle, thank you for the Blu-rays. They have those moments, but they also have the advertising placards. And this episode was brought to you by Sanka, if I remember right. Sanka.
Senka.
Some coffee for you.
All
They
right,
still make Sanka, I'm pretty sure.
nice.
But it sounds old
Okay,
timey.
it does.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll be back with that in 1 week's time. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Freddie. Thanks, everybody. Welcome back to season 2.
Woo!